Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really embarking on a journey, aren't we? Right into the core of ourselves.
We are. We're tackling Carl Jung's, well, his profound concept of the process of individuation.
Right. And we're drawing from this really rich chapter that um, lays out this pattern, this psychic growth pattern he saw from looking at thousands, literally thousands of dreams.
Exactly. And the idea here isn't just, academic psychology. It's about giving you, the listener, a new way to understand the deeper currents running through your own life,
Even if your dreams seem totally bizarre, right? Like just a jumble of weird images.
especially then. Because this deep dive aims to show how even those fragmented bits can be part of a much bigger, meaningful story inside you.
Hmm.
Recognizing that hidden direction.
It's like that analogy, the
Yeah.
meandering pattern. Individual dreams are like, what? Brushstrokes?
Yeah, or like tiny details in a huge, complex design. Alone, they might not make much sense.
But over time, if you look at the whole sequence, this sort of hidden tendency emerges, a drive towards psychological maturity,
Yep.
wholeness.
Precisely, towards wholeness. And the organizing force behind all this, the real center, Jung called the self.
Okay, and this is crucial. The self is not the ego. We need to be really clear about that.
Absolutely vital. Think of the ego as maybe the captain of the ship, making the day-to-day decisions, navigating what's right in front.
While the self is the whole ocean, the ship, the captain, the currents, the depths, everything.
That's a great way to put it. Jung called the self the nuclear atom of our psychic system. It's the totality. The ego is just, relatively speaking, a small part of that immense inner landscape.
It feels like humanity's always had some kind of inkling of this inner center, doesn't it?
It really does seem that way. You look across cultures, across history.
Like the Greeks with their daemon, that personal guiding spirit idea.
Or the Egyptians and the Ba soul. The Romans had the genius, that sort of inherent spark within.
And you see it in more traditional societies too, right? Protective spirits.
Yeah, often personified, maybe in an animal or an object, or linked to ancestors. It's this deep human need to give form to that inner something.
Like the Naskapi Indians up in Labrador. Really isolated groups.
Right. Far from complex doctrines. But their understanding is so direct, they talk about an inner companion.
Mistapeo, the great man.
Yeah, Mistapeo. Lives in the heart, immortal, gets reborn eventually. And they believe he communicates primarily through dreams.
So listening to dreams wasn't just like optional for them, it was fundamental.
A fundamental obligation. They paid close attention, tried to understand the meaning, tested the validity. It was a real relationship.
A reciprocal one. Listen to the great man, and he sends more guidance through dreams.
Exactly. And they'd even give the dream content form in their art. They believed dishonesty, negativity pushed him away, while generosity drew him closer.
And it wasn't just inner life stuff, was it? It guided hunting, practical things, even weather.
Totally holistic. Inner and outer worlds deeply connected. It really gives you a sense of this natural, almost uncontaminated insight into what Jung later called the self.
So this highlights that the self isn't something we build, it's there from the start, an inborn potential.
Yes, like a blueprint for wholeness. It's present from the beginning, but its full development, well, that depends on the ego being receptive, listening to his messages.
Like that mountain pine seed analogy, the seed has the whole tree potential.
But the soil, the sun, the wind, life's circumstances shape how it actually grows. The self's totality interacts with our specific life.
Okay, so there's the unconscious process just happening, and then there's consciously engaging with it. That's a key difference.
A crucial distinction. We might all be on the journey, but real awareness comes when we realize it's happening and choose to cooperate. It's like navigating the river versus just floating downstream.
And people often experience this conscious engagement as something bigger than themselves, a guiding force.
Exactly. A suprapersonal force, as Jung called it.
Yeah.
It feels like the Naskapi's great man communicating through symbols, through dreams.
But cooperating means the ego has to let go a bit, give up some control.
It does. It can't be so rigidly fixed on its own conscious goals and immediate desires that it just blocks out these deeper signals from the self.
It makes you think about some existentialist philosophies. They strip away illusions, but maybe don't always fully open that door to the unconscious.
That's a really insightful point. Older cultures sometimes seem to have a more inherent grasp of needing to step back from that purely utilitarian view to make space.
Which brings us to that wonderful Chuang-Tzu story. The carpenter stone and the huge useless oak tree.
Ah, yes, a classic. Stone, the master craftsman, sees this massive tree and immediately dismisses it. Wood's no good for ships or tools, totally useless.
But then the tree comes to him in a dream, right, and basically says, "You think those fruit trees are so great? They get hacked at, violated. I became useless so I could live out my full lifespan."
What do you, a mere mortal, know about judging another being's worth? It's such a powerful rebuke to our narrow practical view.
And Stone gets it. He realizes fulfilling your own inherent nature, your destiny, that's the real achievement. Our ego's values need to yield to that deeper wisdom. The tree is like the individuation process itself.
Exactly, and that detail about the earth altar beneath the tree.
Yes, that rough stone for sacrifices. Such a potent image. The conscious ego needing to surrender its fixed ideas to the power of the unconscious.
It's about listening to what the inner totality, the self, wants now, not just sticking rigidly to our own plans.
And it's vital to remember this path, this individuation, it's unique for everyone.
Absolutely, the drive is universal, but the specific journey is utterly individual. Like the pine trees, again, all pines, but each distinct, shaped by its own spot on the mountain.
Which is why trying to lay it out systematically is,
Yeah.
well, it's basically impossible, isn't
It
it?
really is. The psychic stuff we're dealing with is alive, it's moving, it's emotional, often irrational, it's messy.
Like trying to pin down light in physics, sometimes particles, sometimes waves.
Exactly. To even describe one psychic event properly, you need to look from so many different angles.
Okay, so where does this usually start to show up in our lives? Childhood seems key.
Childhood is often where the first hints appear. It's a time of such intense, unfiltered experience. Early dreams can sometimes symbolically lay out the basic structure of the psyche, even hint at future destiny.
Like that haunting example Jung gives the young woman in the Jack Frost dream.
Yes, chilling. As a child, she dreamt Jack Frost pinched her stomach, and she'd wake up having actually pinched herself. But the eerie part was her lack of emotional reaction.
That coldness.
That coldness, that frozen, unfeeling quality. Tragically, it foreshadowed her later suicide, cold, detached, self-destructive. The dream held this terrible premonition.
Yeah, it shows how powerful symbols can be, even so early on.
And sometimes it's not a dream, but a real event from childhood that sticks, that acts like a symbolic prophecy.
Kids remember weird things, don't they? Things adults might dismiss.
Exactly. They selectively remember incidents that resonate deeply with their core psychic issues,
Yeah.
even if they seem minor externally. Those memories often hold clues to later patterns.
Then, as kids get older, school age, the focus shifts, right? Building the ego, adapting to the outside world.
Yes, and that phase inevitably brings painful shocks. Disillusionment, realizing you're different, feeling lonely. The world's imperfection, suffering, evil, these become conscious problems.
And if that ego development gets disrupted somehow.
If it's really difficult, children might retreat inwards,
Yeah.
into a kind of inner fortress.
And that's when those specific symbols might appear. Circles, squares.
Yes, recurring circular, quadrangular, nuclear motifs often show up in dreams or drawings then. They represent that core psychic nucleus, the self, the vital center, trying to maintain integrity when things feel threatening.
So the conscious decision to really engage with the self, where does that often begin? It's not usually smooth sailing, is it?
Rarely. It often starts with what feels like a wounding of the personality. Some kind of suffering, deep unease.
A crisis, maybe. That acts like a call from the self.
Exactly, a call, but the ego almost never recognizes it as that initially. It feels unjustly attacked, thwarted.
And tends to blame, well, anything external. Ourselves, other people, circumstances, fate, God.
Or sometimes, interestingly, everything looks fine on the surface, no big crisis, just this persistent, gnawing boredom, emptiness, meaninglessness.
Myths and fairy tales pick up on this stage, don't they? The ailing king whose kingdom is falling apart.
Yes, or the barren royal couple, the monster stealing resources, darkness over the land. It's like the ego's familiar world is suddenly under threat, or the inner friend first appears as something disruptive.
And the cure in those stories is never simple. It's always something really strange and hard to find.
The white blackbird, the water of life, golden hairs from a devil, always extraordinary, outside the ego's normal toolkit.
So the point of this initial darkness is what? To make us look deeper.
Usually, yes. It points towards something unexpected, deep in the unconscious, that can only really come out through symbols, dreams, fantasies.
So focusing on that unconscious stuff, without judging it, helpful images can emerge.
They can. But often, the very first step inward involves a pretty painful realization about our own shortcomings, our usual attitudes, facing some uncomfortable truths we've avoided.
Right. So whether the unconscious feels like a helper or a challenger, we eventually hit a point where we need to adjust our conscious view, become more open to this inner feedback.
That's often the turning point. And it's usually where we first encounter what Jung called the realization of the shadow.
The shadow. Okay, let's define that. It's the unconscious part of our personality.
Basically, yes.
Hmm.
It often shows up personified in dreams, same gender usually.
Yeah.
Because all this stuff that's unknown or barely known to the ego. Qualities we could be conscious of, but we disown them.
Why? Because they're negative, unacceptable, don't fit our self-image.
All of the above. And it can contain collective, more universal human stuff too, not just personal bits.
So seeing the shadow means becoming aware of, well, all the things we hate in other people but deny in ourselves.
Pretty much. Egotism, laziness, dishonesty, cowardice, greed, all those little sins we rationalize away in ourselves but spot instantly elsewhere. It could bring a lot of shame, discomfort.
Holding up a mirror to the parts we keep hidden.
Exactly. And you know that flash of anger, that defensiveness when someone criticizes you?
Yeah.
Often that's a sign you've just bumped into your own unconscious shadow. It's one thing if someone else calls you out, but when your own dreams start pointing the finger.
Oof. That's harder to argue with, the inner judge.
That's when the ego gets cornered.
Yeah.
Often leads to that uncomfortable silence. That's the real start of self-education, facing the inner mess, like Hercules cleaning the Augean stables. Big job.
And the shadow isn't just omissions, things we failed to do. It's actions, too.
Definitely. Those impulsive remarks, ill-thought-out actions.
Yeah.
We find ourselves dealing with the fallout before we even know why we did it.
And it's more vulnerable to collective infections.
Yes. Much more than our conscious self. In a crowd, people can do things they'd never do alone. Often out of fear of standing out, looking foolish, the shadow gets swept along.
And we tend to see it most clearly in people of the same sex.
Often, yes. That's where the projections tend to land most strongly.
Okay, let's look at that first dream example. The hardworking, disciplined 48-year-old man. Repressed pleasure, right?
Right. Very controlled life. He dreamed of a strange building, unfamiliar, and then saw an old school friend in the backyard.
So the strange building is his unexplored psychic potential, the parts he doesn't know.
Likely, yes. The wider scope of his own psyche he hasn't integrated. And the old school friend, sort of separate in the backyard.
That's a forgotten part of himself from childhood.
Probably representing his lost capacity for joy, spontaneity, maybe his more extroverted side that got suppressed by all that self-discipline. Valuable childhood energies often get submerged. The dream is trying to reconnect him.
So the shadow holds valuable stuff, but it's hard to integrate. It feels alien.
Often, yes. It's needed for wholeness, but presented in a form that feels difficult or unfamiliar. The big unknown house emphasizes his lack of familiarity with his own depths.
And this is typical for an introvert's shadow-repressed extroversion pleasure.
It's a common pattern. An extrovert's shadow would likely look quite different, maybe repressed introversion, fear of being alone, that sort of thing.
Okay, the contrasting example. The lively young man, successful externally, but neglecting his inner life, creative work.
Yes. He dreamed of a Frenchman lying passively on a couch, looking sort of downcast, and also a shady desperado type, and a respectable official or portly businessman.
And the twist was they were all secretly the same person, plotting against him.
Exactly. The Frenchman and the hidden desperado seem to represent his deeply neglected, introverted side reflection, creativity which feels impoverished, maybe even dangerous because it's so ignored.
While the official and the portly man are his successful outer life, his ambitions, public persona.
Right. And there was a detail where the portly man got sick, mirroring the dreamer's actual physical issues from overdoing it externally. But significantly, this figure had only moisture, not blood.
Meaning the outer success lacked real life, passion, inner substance.
Precisely. The unconscious is suggesting that killing off that one-sided focus wouldn't be a real loss to his overall well-being.
And the Frenchman, the inner figure, seemed satisfied at the end.
Yes, indicating this seemingly negative aspect was only perceived that way because his conscious life was so out of sync with it.
And there was another layer, the Frenchman linked to love affairs, connecting the figures to power and sex drives.
Yes. The official portly man clearly embodies the power drive, external success. The hidden Frenchman embodies the often repressed energies of intimacy, sexuality. Confronting this inner force starts to integrate those aspects too.
So these dreams show the shadow is complex. It can hold suppressed introversion, ambition, all sorts.
Exactly. And whether it becomes a friend or a foe depends entirely on our conscious relationship with it. It's not inherently bad.
Like any relationship, needs effort, Understanding, acceptance.
Right. Hostility comes from ignorance, fear, neglect of these parts of ourselves.
Interestingly, the shadow can seem positive sometimes if you're repressing your better nature.
It can. Or appear negative, like a cold intellectual, if someone's living out raw emotion without balance. It's always the opposite side of the ego, embodying what we dislike or deny.
But integrating it isn't just about insight, is it? The drives are powerful.
Very powerful, often stronger than logic. Sometimes it takes a harsh external experience, a real shock, to make us confront it.
Or a heroic conscious decision. But that often needs help from the self.
Often, yes, that deeper inner compass than Escapi's great man.
And the shadow's power doesn't automatically mean it should be repressed. It might align with the self.
That's the tricky part. Sometimes its energy comes from that deeper urge towards wholeness. It gets hard to distinguish. The unconscious is like a moonlit landscape, boundaries blur.
That contamination idea Jung talked about, things getting mixed up.
Exactly. Even potentially positive forces can get tangled up with the shadow proper. Was that Frenchman purely bad, or did he hold needed introversion? Should those bolting horses be stopped, or do they represent vital energy?
So if the dream isn't clear, the conscious personality has to decide, make a judgment call.
Ultimately, yes. And if the shadow figure does hold valuable, life-affirming energy, the task becomes assimilation, integrating it.
Which means setting aside pride, living out stuff that feels dark or uncomfortable but is actually needed for growth.
Yes, it can be a real sacrifice for the ego, just as hard as conquering a destructive passion, but in the opposite direction, embracing the apparent negative to find the positive.
The ethical complexity here reminds me of that Quranic story, Moses and Khadir, the green one.
A profound story. Khadir does these seemingly terrible things, sinks a boat, kills a young man, helps ungrateful people.
And Moses is outraged, naturally.
Right. But Khadir reveals the hidden benevolent purpose behind each act, saving people from pirates, preventing future harm, protecting treasure for orphans. Moses' judgment was based on limited conscious understanding.
So dark figures in dreams aren't always just our personal flaws needing fixing.
No. They can sometimes personify the self with its own paradoxical wisdom, or even represent higher guiding forces, like Khadir acting for God. Discerning the difference, shadow flaw or self-urging, is incredibly difficult.
And dream language is so subtle, interpretation can feel impossible sometimes.
It can. So the best approach might be to accept the ethical doubt, hold off judgment, and just keep observing the dream narrative unfold.
Like Cinderella sorting the lentils from the ashes. Impossible consciously, but with patience and maybe help from unconscious impulses.
Exactly, like the helpful doves or ants. A way forward emerges.
You know, deep down, we often do have a sense of the right way, don't we? But the ego.
The clown ego, yes, with all its noise and anxieties, it can drown out that quieter inner knowing. We have to learn to tune in.
And sometimes, even trying our best, understanding fails.
It can. In those moments, you act with courage, based on what feels most authentic then, but stay open to changing course if the unconscious gives clearer signals later.
And there are rare cases where resisting the unconscious might be necessary to stay human.
Very rare, complex situations, yes. Preserving basic values might sometimes mean consciously resisting an unconscious pull.
Okay, so beyond the shadow, other figures emerge. The Anima and Animus.
Yes, often appearing, you might say, from behind the shadow. The Anima, the inner feminine for men, the Animus, the inner masculine for women. They bring new challenges, new possibilities.
Let's start with the Anima. It personifies what exactly in a man?
All his unconscious feminine tendencies. Feelings, moods, intuition, receptivity to the irrational, personal love, connection to nature, and crucially, his relationship to his own unconscious.
It makes sense why historically priestesses were often seen as mediators, right? Connected to that intuitive knowing.
Precisely. And think of Eskimo shamans sometimes adopting feminine dress or mannerisms.
To embody that inner feminine side, needed to connect with the spirit world, the unconscious.
Exactly. There's that account of the young man initiated by a shaman in a snow hole.
Right. Exhausted, dreamlike state. And he sees this luminous, authoritative woman who gives instructions, becomes his protective spirit.
A perfect illustration of the anima as a personification of the unconscious, a guiding inner figure.
And personally, a man's anima is shaped a lot by his mother.
Significantly.
Yeah.
A negative or unresolved mother relationship often leads to a negative anima.
Manifesting as irritability, depression, insecurity, touchiness.
Yes. constantly whispering feelings of worthlessness, meaninglessness, a gloomy shadow. In extreme cases, it can become a destructive death demon.
The femme fatale.
Exactly. The Queen of the Night in Mozart, the sirens, the Lorelei, figures luring men to destruction. That Siberian tale of the lonely hunter and the owl woman is powerful too.
Come, lonely hunter. That seductive call. He abandons reality, swims the freezing river.
Only for her to turn into a mocking owl.
Mm.
He drowns, stranded. The anima as an unrealizable, destructive dream of love, pulling him away from life.
Other negative forms, the poison damsel.
Yes, with those undermining remarks. Or the man overly influenced by certain women, or overly effeminate. Excessive sentimentality, extreme touchiness, destructive intellectual games like the princess with deadly riddles.
And constantly indulging in erotic fantasy. That can be an infantile anima thing.
Often, yes. Especially if real feeling relationships are lacking. The inner feminine seeking connection in a distorted way.
Okay, but like the shadow, the anima has positive sides too, crucial ones.
Absolutely. It helps a man intuitively find the right partner, discern hidden truths where logic fails. More deeply, it attunes his mind to inner values, meaning spirituality.
Opens the door to deeper levels, like an inner radio receiver, picking up the voice of the great man.
That's a good way to think of it. A mediator, a bridge to the inner world, to the self. Think of Beatrice guiding Dante, or Isis initiating Apuleius.
We saw it in that psychotherapist's dream too, the one feeling cut off from religion.
Yes. In the church with his mother and wife, a nun tells him to read from a mass book with 16 symbolic pictures.
The message being, he needs to be the priest of his own inner life, tend the church of his soul.
Exactly. The nun, his introverted spiritual anima, guides him to contemplate these deep psychic images. The 16 pictures, 4 times 4, symbolizing the wholeness this inner mass aims for.
And Jung saw anima development in stages, represented by figures.
Yes, typically 4. Eve, instinctual biological. Helen of Troy, romantic aesthetic. The Virgin Mary, spiritual devotion love. And Sophia, or sapientia, wisdom, like the Mona Lisa maybe, representing integration, wisdom.
So practically, working with the anima means taking feelings, moods, fantasies seriously.
Yes, and giving them form. Writing, painting, music, whatever, expressing them.
But then examining them, intellectually, ethically, treating them as real communications.
Crucially, not just whims, but potential messages from the depths.
Literature is full of anima guides, isn't it? Like in She or Faust's Eternal Feminine.
Absolutely. And that medieval mystical text describing the anima as this powerful mediator, holding life and death, law, wisdom, it captures its significance.
What about the medieval cult of the lady? Was that an attempt to engage the anima?
It can be seen that way, yes. An attempt to differentiate and honor the feminine side, externally and internally. The Grail bearer, Conduer Amour, is a key anima figure there.
But it got mixed up with Virgin Mary veneration later, and negative aspects projected onto witches.
That tended to happen, yes. A split occurred.
We see similar figures elsewhere, though. Kuan Yin in China, Shakti in India, Fatima in Islam.
Definitely. Parallel archetypal energies manifesting across cultures, fulfilling that need to connect with the feminine principle.
But worshiping an external figure can miss the personal aspect. And just projecting onto real women leads to dependency or fantasy.
Both are potential pitfalls. The key is taking your own fantasies and feelings seriously. That prevents stagnation, helps rediscover the anima as the inner messenger from the self.
Okay, let's switch to the animus. The male personification in a woman's unconscious. Good and bad aspects here, too.
Yes, very much so. But it often manifests differently from the anima. Less about moods or erotic fantasy, more like hidden sacred convictions, unshakable opinions.
Like a loud, insistent inner voice, or sudden emotional outbursts.
It can be. Even outwardly, very feminine women can have a really hard, inflexible, judgmental animus inside.
Giving rise to those kinds of thoughts like, all I want is love and he doesn't love me, or framing everything as only having 2 bad options.
Exactly, those rigid, generalized pronouncements. They often sound logical in an abstract way, but they just don't fit the nuance of the individual woman's actual situation.
Heathcliff in Wuthering Heights is a classic literary example, right? That dark, brooding, destructive energy.
A powerful example of a partly negative, even demonic animus figure, yes.
And just as the mother shapes the anima, the father shapes the animus.
Fundamentally, he often endows it with these seemingly absolute truths or convictions that can override the woman's own feelings, intuition, her personal reality. She feels she must adhere to them.
Which is why the negative animus can also be a death demon. like in that gypsy fairy tale.
Yes, the handsome stranger who turns out to be the king of the dead. It represents how idealized, disconnected, dreamy thoughts can cut a woman off from real life, real connection.
Other negative roles. Robbers, murderers like Bluebeard.
Yes, personifying those cold, destructive, self-critical thoughts that surface, especially when emotional needs are ignored.
And nursing those secret destructive attitudes, it harms others too. Like that awful example of the old woman preferring her son dead.
A chilling illustration of how damaging that hidden negativity can be. It also manifests as passivity, paralysis of feeling, deep insecurity, self-doubt.
And the real danger is when the ego identifies with it,
Mhm.
gets possessed, acts against her true self.
That's when it becomes particularly destructive, yes, leading to actions contrary to her genuine values.
But again, there's a positive side. A bridge to the self through creativity.
Absolutely. Like that woman's dream, the two veiled, threatening male figures who turn out to be artists.
Revealing that behind the anxiety was untapped creative potential. The tormentors were actually neglected gifts.
Precisely. Recognizing them transformed the destructive animus into a positive force. Her sister, in the dream, avoiding them, represented the neglected talent.
And the animus often appears as a group of men, reflecting its collective nature.
Yes, that's common. And you hear it in the language. Women strongly influenced by the animus often use one, they, everybody, always, should, ought, and personal generalized.
What about myths like Beauty and the Beast? The prince turned into an animal.
Symbolically, that can represent the animus becoming conscious, integrated through love and acceptance. The ban on looking or questioning signifies initial blind trust in the unconscious.
And breaking the promise leading to the long quest represents the conscious work needed to understand it.
Exactly. That conscious engagement takes time, effort, suffering. But facing it allows the animus to become a valuable inner companion.
Providing initiative, courage, objectivity, spiritual wisdom.
All of those, yes.
And like the anima, the animus has developmental stages.
Jung suggested 4 here, too.
Mm.
Maybe Tarzan, physical power. Then someone like Shelley or Hemingway, initiative, action, romance. Then perhaps Lloyd George, the power of the word intellect. And finally, Gandhi, spiritual meaning, wisdom.
So a developed animus connects a woman to the spirit of her age, makes her receptive to new ideas, like historical diviners.
It can function that way, yes, opening your mind to broader creative and spiritual currents.
But it can cause marital problems too, especially if both partners are projecting reciprocal possession.
That can be a very difficult dynamic, yes. Both anima and animus issues can fuel conflict.
But positively, it's about enterprise, courage, truthfulness, spiritual depth, helping her understand her situation objectively, find a spiritual attitude.
Yes, provided she maintains that crucial willingness to question her own convictions, her own animus-driven opinions.
Okay, so after seriously wrestling with the anima or animus, differentiating the ego, the unconscious changes character again.
It often does. When you're no longer identified with those figures, the unconscious tends to manifest more directly through symbols of the self, that innermost psychic nucleus.
Appearing as superior figures, goddesses, priestesses for women, wise old men, gurus for men.
Often, yes. Those numinous guiding figures. Like the soldier meeting the old guitarist who was our Lord himself, in that folktale, the self, helping overcome a dangerous anima aspect.
Or the Eskimo girl warned against the moon wizard by the tiny, wise little woman, the self offering a different path.
Exactly. The unassuming figure holds the deeper wisdom.
But the self isn't always old or wise-looking. It can be young.
It can. Symbolizing something timeless, potential for renewal that exists outside our normal sense of time. Like the middle-aged man dreaming of the vibrant youth on the powerful horse in the garden.
Signifying renewal, creative energy emerging.
A creative élan vital, yes. And for women, this youthful self might appear as a gifted girl, like the woman struggling with a religious problem washing the pavement, the stagnant river.
And the mischievous student appears, then the little girl effortlessly pulls her across the water. Help from the self.
Clearly symbolizing the self's power to overcome that spiritual blockage in an unexpected way.
So the varying ages show the self is present throughout life, beyond our time perception. And it's not always human form.
Right. It can appear as that gigantic cosmic man figure embracing the cosmos, symbolizing the activation of that vital psychic center needed to resolve deep conflict, find unity.
We see that cosmic man everywhere in myths, don't we? Adam, Gayomart, Purusha.
Panku in China, often seen positively as the underlying principle of the world, and often linked to plant motifs.
Suggesting something self-grown, connected to nature. less driven by complex instincts.
Perhaps. And the symbol persists. Atom as a supersoul, Gaiomart yielding metals, and the first humans, Purusha in the heart and filling the cosmos.
It represents the beginning, but also the goal of life, orienting us towards the self, suggesting life is more than just instincts.
Exactly. And it often gets identified with central religious figures. Christ, Krishna, Buddha, the Son of Man, Adam Kadmon, pointing towards the ultimate, perhaps unknowable meaning of existence.
And achieving this goal isn't an external thing, it's the ego's focus shifting, merging more with the self.
It's an inner transformation, yes. The ego's outward orientation diminishes as it aligns with the self.
The universality of this great man symbol is striking, as a goal and expression of life's mystery, and often bisexual, reconciling opposites.
Yes, often appearing in dreams as a divine or royal couple, symbolizing that inner union of masculine and feminine.
Like in that complex dream of the 47-year-old man on the platform.
With the she-bear polishing the dark oval stone.
Then the lioness and cub polishing round stone.
So the transformations, the bear becomes a naked woman, the lions become a royal couple in a carriage. So much symbolism there.
The she-bear as a mother goddess. The dark stone as his core self. Polishing as life's suffering, transforming the soul.
Plausible interpretations, yes. The round stones and lions strongly suggest the self, totality, the urge toward individuation, perhaps veiled in passion initially.
And the royal couple is the conscious realization of that urge, inner masculine and feminine united.
That seems very likely. The emergence of the anima, the woman, and the self, royal couple, in a more integrated conscious form.
And the shift in the women singing, from sentimental to a solemn hymn, indicates inner harmony in the anima.
A move towards deeper, more integrated feeling, yes.
The self can also appear in active imagination, like the woman who saw it as a deer.
Yes, her connecting animal, her objective eye, redeeming her from meaninglessness, embodying nature's fire, the deer symbolizing instinct, connection.
So the self as animal is common, representing instinct, connection to surroundings, helpful animals in myths.
Exactly. It suggests our psychic core isn't isolated, but woven into the world, into nature, the cosmos.
Our unconscious is attuned to our surroundings, our group. Like the Naskapi great man giving hunting advice.
Yes, and inspiring songs. It's not just primitives either. Jung found dreams guide modern people too, with inner and outer problems. Everyday things become symbolic.
But for modern people, dreams often focus more on the attitude towards the self, because that relationship is more disturbed.
Often, yes. Our uprooted consciousness gets tangled in external stuff, blocking the messages from the self. So dreams work on restoring that receptivity.
The self, symbolized as a stone, is also frequent, precious or ordinary, like in the Beryllion dream.
Yes, and crystals too, symbolizing the union of matter and spirit, order, precision.
Stones feel eternal, used in memorials. The alchemical lapis symbolizing something indestructible, like the experience of God within.
Yes. Profound experiences of the self happen to most people. A religious attitude involves trying to stay attuned to that inner partner.
It's fascinating that this highest symbol of the self is often inorganic matter. Stone points to that psyche-matter mystery.
It does. A deep, unknown relationship explored by psychosomatic medicine and by Jung's concept of synchronicity.
Meaningful coincidence, not just random chance.
Right. A causally unrelated inner event, like a thought or dream, an outer event happening together in a way that feels deeply meaningful.
Like dreaming of a specific rare bird and then seeing one the next day, as opposed to just noticing a black frog when someone dies, which is convention, not coincidence.
Exactly. Synchronicity often happens when archetypes are activated. The archetype manifests inwardly and outwardly, seemingly simultaneously.
Like ancient Chinese ideas of correspondence, medicine, philosophy, astrology, oracles based on meaningful patterns.
Similar underlying principle, yes. Synchronicity offers a way to explore that psyche-matter link the stone symbol hints at, but it's still not fully understood.
And these events often happen during key individuation phases, but we might miss them.
Very often unnoticed or dismissed, yes.
Modern life often feels empty, boring, leading to chasing distractions.
A common experience. And the turn to Eastern practices, while valuable, might not always lead to that direct, unaided contact with one's own inner center that Jung emphasized.
His approach was about reaching it alone, not just following a set path.
Yes, discovering your unique connection. Giving the self daily attention means living on two levels outer duties, plus alertness to inner hints in dreams, events.
Like the Chinese, similarly the cat watching the mouse hole. patient, alert attention.
leading to that sudden awakening, that personal, undeniable inner knowing.
And why do we lose contact with the self? Two main reasons.
One is one-sidedness, getting dominated by one drive or image, like the stag forgetting hunger. Primitives called it loss of soul.
In a second.
Over-consolidated ego consciousness. Too rigid, too controlled, blocking impulses from the self. Why civilized dreams often aim to restore receptivity.
Mythologies emphasize the four corners, mandalas, symbols of the self-center.
Yes, that nuclear atom. The Naskapi hunter representing his great man as a mandala.
Others use them more formally, Navajo sand paintings for healing, Eastern meditation.
All aiming to restore inner balance, connection to the center. And when mandalas appear spontaneously in Mahdi's dreams, even if the person doesn't know the term, it can be incredibly powerful, integrating.
Like the 62-year-old woman's dream, the golden disc on the hill moving to the round stone table.
Beautiful example. The self becoming central in her inner landscape, finding a permanent base. Her long work with dreams bearing fruit connects to the great man-plant life symbol too.
And moving to the right, suggesting consciousness. The round stone table, stability.
Yes, it shows how genuinely turning inward, following dreams and fantasies, leads to the self emerging, bringing inner renewal.
Now this is crucial. Every personification, shadow, anima, animus, self has light and dark aspects.
Absolutely crucial. None are purely good or purely bad.
And the dark side of the self is the most dangerous because of its power.
Yes.
Yeah.
Identification with it leads to inflation, megalomania, delusions, losing touch with reality. Losing your sense of humor, human connection, are warning signs.
That Iranian fairy tale, The Secret of the Bath Badgered, illustrates this double aspect beautifully.
Wonderfully. The round bath, mandala, rising waters, unconscious, barber lost mirror, lost reflection, center stone, self's core, Gayomart, first man potential, the parrot, evil spirit of imitation,
Golden bow waro, ego trying to reach self, petrification, stagnation via imitation, and the diamond, realized self, brings life back.
It really emphasizes that individuation excludes just copying others. True following means devotion to your own unique path.
And the ego needs to keep functioning normally, while staying aware it's incomplete, receptive.
Yes, there's that constant tension, feeling connected to the universe while being an ordinary human. Maintaining balance is key.
Dreams make that sense of individual importance feel real, give strength to go against the grain, take our own soul seriously.
They can, yes. That feeling the great man has special tasks for us can be incredibly empowering.
But obeying the unconscious can feel like a burden sometimes, messing up our plans.
It definitely can. Like St. Christopher carrying the child.
Who becomes the weight of the universe? Christ, the self.
Exactly. It humbles him, but brings redemption. Following the self can feel unexpectedly heavy for the ego, but it leads to wholeness.
So obeying might mean not doing what you please or what others want, requiring separation, which can look antisocial.
It can be misunderstood that way, yes. Finding yourself might require stepping away from the group temporarily.
But there's a collective social aspect to the self too, not just individual.
Often overlooked. People following their dreams find they're often about relationships warnings or pointing towards connections.
Dream figures of others can be projections of ourselves or actual info about them.
Both interpretations are possible. Projection needs subjective analysis, but sometimes it's genuine intuition about the other person the unconscious is attuned.
And ultimately, the self helps order relationships once the ego deals with its own stuff.
Yes, spiritually attuned people find each other, form groups bound by the self, not just ego needs, replacing familiar bonds with a deeper unity.
So focusing only on the outer world harms those unconscious connections, makes propaganda and advertising potentially damaging.
Because they bypass or suppress those genuine unconscious activities that connect people authentically. Even with good intentions, manipulation can be destructive.
Can we influence the unconscious deliberately? Change our dreams?
Not directly. Real transformation takes that long process interpretation, self-confrontation, changing conscious attitudes.
Misusing symbols might impress people short-term, but the effect is unpredictable.
Yes. Deliberate attempts to influence the mass unconscious haven't really worked consistently. It seems as autonomous as the individual unconscious.
Though the unconscious might use external motifs, like dreams about Berlin's weak spots, or reacting to a film like Hiroshima Mon Amour.
It can use external material to express its own purpose, yes, giving the appearance of being influenced.
So manipulators get temporary success through pressure or violence, but it just represses genuine reactions. leads to dissociation.
Oh, exactly, and ultimately fails because it imposes our fundamental instincts towards wholeness.
Small groups are best for living, and the self fosters them through interconnection.
Jung thought so. Creating emotional ties, relatedness. Stability comes from within, not just rules or projections. So individuation leads to the best social adaptation.
Like in that dream, the museum attic becoming a ship's cabin with Miss X.
Yes. Dreamer and compatriots meet Miss X, daughter of a hero. She intuitively brings portraits to life, but the others reject it indignantly.
Miss X is the Anima soul guiding liberation, bringing unconscious images to life. The museum ship as a saving arc.
Good interpretation. The living portraits are meaningful unconscious images. The indignant people are resistance, statistical thinking, rational prejudice against the unconscious.
Suggesting real liberation starts with psychological transformation, not just external change.
That seems to be the dream's message, yes.
Public opinion relies on sampling attitudes, manipulators' biases. Statistics miss the individual.
Whereas an individuating person has a positive contagious effect, often wordless. That's the inner path Ms. X pointed towards.
And most religions contain symbols of individuation. Christ, Krishna, Buddha.
At their core, yes, images representing that journey to wholeness.
So for believers, religious symbols regulate life, appear in dreams, like the Catholic woman dreaming of being a priestess, or the church rebuilding dream.
Yes, showing the unconscious's living engagement with conscious religious ideas. Which raises the question, are there general trends in religious dreams today?
Jung saw one in modern Christianity, an unconscious push to add a fourth element to the Trinity. Feminine, dark, even evil.
Reuniting the opposites split into God and devil matter. The Godhead image itself undergoing transformation.
A process involving preserving the old and something new emerging, like a spiral.
An ascending spiral, yes. Returning to the same point but higher.
Like the Protestant woman who painted the spiral mandala after the dream order, and then dreamt of God's cloak in the spiral.
Yes, Jung saw the spiral as a new symbol for the Holy Ghost, more dynamic.
In her second painting, Dreamer and Animus over Jerusalem, Satan's wing descending. But the wing resembled God's cloak.
Suggesting the same energy viewed differently, the spiral still above, signifying potential development. The wing is the dark, uncanny aspect from the human perspective.
And Jung thought this had collective meaning, prophesying a divine darkness, evolution into the unconscious dimension.
He saw it as potentially significant, yes, a pointer towards a shift.
Which understandably might frighten people. Fear of altering official doctrines, leading to rejection of depth psychology.
That fear exists, yes. Jung saw three groups: believers in harmony, non-believers exploring via psychology, and those stuck in between, struggling with inner conflict. Taking the unconscious seriously needs courage.
Official doctrines are collective consciousness, but Jung traced their origins to the unconscious, challenging the idea of pure revelation.
Yes, he pointed to examples like Black Elk's vision leading to a healing ritual for his tribe.
Or the Eskimo Eagle Festival starting from a hunter's inner encounter.
Exactly. Individual unconscious revelations becoming cultural religious practices, evolving, getting shaped, beautified over time.
But the downside is people lose the personal experience, rely on belief.
That can happen. And ancient traditions can resist new creative impulses from the unconscious. Theologians defend true symbols, forgetting they originated from that very unconscious function.
Because no symbol exists without a human psyche to receive and express it.
Fundamentally, yeah.
And the objection about religious reality existing independently, Jung's response was, who's making that assertion?
If not a human psyche, we experience reality through the psyche. We're contained within it.
So discovering the unconscious closes that illusion of knowing reality in itself, like Heisenberg in physics.
A parallel limitation, yes. But the compensation is huge. This vast new field of inner realization, combining science and personal ethical adventure.
And finally reiterating that inner experience is ultimately unique, only partially communicable.
Exactly. We can't fully know another's inner world or what's right for them. The compensation. Discovering the self-social function, uniting those who belong together in that hidden, deeper way.
So in this deep dive, we've really covered a lot of ground. Jung's individuation process, the language of symbols and dreams.
The power of archetypes, shadow, anima, animus, the self itself, and just how deep the unconscious really goes.
And hopefully, for you listening, understanding these ideas, like from this chapter, gives you a new lens, maybe, a framework for looking at your own inner world, the stuff that happens in your life.
We hope so. Because that journey of individuation is so personal, so unique for everyone, guided by that inner wisdom, the self.
And really paying attention to the language of the unconscious. Dreams, fantasies, even those weird coincidences, synchronicities that can offer real direction.
Invaluable direction sometimes. So we'll leave you with a final thought, maybe something to chew on.
Okay.
Consider how these symbols, these patterns we talked about today, how might they be playing out right now in your life? What meandering patterns are emerging in your own experiences, and what could they be revealing about your unique path, your growth, your self-discovery?
Something to reflect on. Maybe look at your dreams, your inner life with a bit more awareness.
Exactly, with a newfound awareness.